Have you ever wondered how the United States became the nation it is today? From ancient civilizations to becoming a global superpower, America's history is filled with pivotal moments of struggle and triumph. In this video, we'll explore key moments in history, from the fight for independence and the Civil War to America's rise as a global power and the challenges it faces today. Stay tuned as we explore the history of the United States from its beginnings to the present. Let's dive in. The early days of the United States. Thousands of years before Columbus arrived in 1492, the lands that would become the United States were already inhabited by various Native American tribes. It's not exactly clear how the first people arrived, but one theory suggests that they crossed a land bridge from Siberia to North America over 30,000 years ago. These early settlers, called Paleo-Americans, spread across the continent and built unique civilizations, such as the Mississippian and Pueblo cultures. Meanwhile, much of the territory that is now the U.S. was unexplored by Europeans. It wasn't until 1492 that the Italian explorer Christopher Columbus sailed across the Atlantic, hoping to find a new trade route to Asia, but instead stumbled upon what will be known to Europeans as the New World. This opened the door for further exploration and colonization by European nations like Spain, France, and England. Colonial times and the road to independence. By the early 1600s, European settlers were establishing colonies along the east coast of America. The first successful English colony, Jamestown, was founded in 1607 in Virginia. Over the next century, more colonies were established, and many English settlers relied on slave labor for farming crops like tobacco and rice. The southern colonies became wealthy, while the northern colonies focused on fishing and trade. Tensions began to rise between the American colonies and their British rulers, especially after the French and Indian War in the 1760s. To recover from the costs of the war, Britain imposed new taxes on the colonies, including the famous Stamp Act and tea tax. The colonists weren't happy about these taxes because they had no say in the British Parliament. This led to protests like the Boston Tea Party in 1773, where colonists threw British tea into the harbor in defiance. In 1776, the tension reached its peak. The 13 American colonies declared their independence from Britain, marking the birth of the United States of America. This declaration, known as the Declaration of Independence, was written by Thomas Jefferson and signed by leaders from each of the colonies. The fight for freedom continued in the American Revolutionary War, which lasted from 1775 to 1783. Thanks to help from countries like France, the United States defeated the British and gained their independence. The expansion and growth of a new nation. After gaining independence, the United States focused on expanding its borders. In 1803, President Thomas Jefferson made a huge deal with France, purchasing the Louisiana Territory. This territory doubled the size of the United States and opened up land for new settlers. During this time, pioneers moved westward, often pushing Native American tribes off their land. As more states were added to the Union, the issue of slavery became a major topic of debate. The southern states, with their large plantations, relied on enslaved African Americans for labor. Meanwhile, northern states, with their growing industries, opposed the expansion of slavery. This led to deep divisions between the North and South, which eventually sparked the Civil War in 1861. The Civil War and its aftermath. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln was elected president, and he was against the spread of slavery into new territories. This angered many southern states, and they decided to leave the Union, forming the Confederacy. The Civil War began in 1861, and after 4 bloody years, the Union, or the northern states, emerged victorious in 1865. Slavery was abolished, and the United States began the long process of rebuilding. The post-war period saw the country grappling with issues of segregation, especially in the South. African Americans fought for their civil rights, and many moved north to escape the harsh conditions. At the same time, the country experienced industrial growth, with new factories, railroads, and inventions changing the way people lived and worked. Becoming a global power. In the late 1800s, the United States started to emerge as a world power. The country expanded its influence by acquiring new territories like Hawaii, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. In 1898, the U.S. won the Spanish-American War and became a colonial power. The early 20th century brought even more challenges. World War I began in 1914, and while the United States tried to stay neutral, it was eventually drawn into the conflict in 1917 after Germany attacked American ships. The war ended in 1918, and the U.S. emerged as one of the most powerful nations on Earth. The Roaring Twenties and the Great Depression. The 1920s were a time of excitement and prosperity, known as the Roaring Twenties. The country experienced economic growth, new inventions like cars and radios, and the rise of popular culture. But this period came to an end with the Wall Street crash of 1929, which led to the Great Depression. The economy collapsed, millions lost their jobs, and many families struggled to survive. The Great Depression lasted throughout the 1930s, but the United States began to recover in the 1940s, partly due to the build-up to World War II. World War II and the Cold War. In 1941, Japan attacked the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor, leading the United States to join World War II. The U.S. fought on two fronts, in Europe and the Pacific, and helped bring an end to the war in 1945. After the war, the United States became one of two superpowers, alongside the Soviet Union, sparking the Cold War. This was a period of tension between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, marked by nuclear arms races, espionage, and proxy wars like the Korean War and the Vietnam War. At home, the civil rights movement gained momentum in the 1950s and 1960s. African Americans fought for equality, and laws were passed to end segregation and give them the right to vote. The modern United States. The United States is constantly evolving, facing both challenges and opportunities. From its colonial roots to becoming a global superpower, the journey has been complex. Today, the country grapples with political divisions, social issues, and economic inequalities, yet it remains a land of innovation and ambition. In January 2025, Donald Trump became the 47th president, bringing significant changes to domestic and foreign policies. His administration withdrew from the Paris Climate Agreement and paused foreign aid programs, which sparked concern about the U.S.'s global role. At home, proposed budget cuts, including $800 billion from Medicaid and $4.5 trillion in tax cuts, have raised questions about the country's direction and its impact on the most vulnerable. Social issues continue to dominate the national conversation. The LGBTQ+ community has gained more recognition, with 9.3% of U.S. adults identifying as LGBTQ+ by early 2025. However, policies aimed at dismantling diversity and inclusion programs have created debates about civil rights and equality. While the country continues to move forward, setbacks may slow progress. Economically, the U.S. faces a national debt surpassing $36 trillion, with Social Security and Medicare in danger of depletion. Many states are struggling with budget cuts, impacting education and healthcare services. Economic inequality continues to widen, leaving many to question whether the American dream is still within reach for everyone. Internationally, the U.S. is reassessing its foreign aid and climate policies. The pause on foreign assistance and withdrawal from the Paris Agreement have raised concerns globally. As the U.S. faces tensions with countries like China and Russia, the future of its international relations remains uncertain. Despite these challenges, America continues to be a hub of innovation. Its tech companies lead the world, and its universities remain top-tier in research. People still come to America to chase their dreams, believing in its potential. But the future will depend on how the U.S. addresses its internal divisions, economic struggles, and global role. The answers to these questions will shape the nation's path forward. The history of the United States is an incredible story of growth, struggle, and transformation. From the first people who crossed into the continent thousands of years ago to becoming a global superpower, the journey has been long and full of challenges. Yet, through it all, the spirit of independence and the dream of a better life have been key driving forces behind the growth of this nation. If you enjoyed this journey through American history, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Stay tuned for more exciting stories from history.